I can't help but think this persistent level of demonization and harassment of Israelis and Jews, along with this rhetoric that celebrates terrorism and violence against Israelis and Jews, um, made for an environment that enabled this to happen, right? I mean, this is what we have been warning about, that this type of rhetoric, unchecked, will have deadly consequences. Well, it seems like they targeted a Jewish institution for this attack, right? The Jewish Museum. And if information that is available that we have identified about this person's background being involved in, various Israel, militant anti-Israel groups, uh, is correct, then somebody who opposes Israel but decides to lash out against the Jewish institution, that's anti-Semitic because you're ascribing blame against an entire religious community for the actions of the state. By the way, violence targeting the Jewish community, because of who they are, that is anti-Semitic as well. So, I mean, there's multiple factors here that suggest to us that this was an attack against the Jewish community, not some random person who like found an opportunistic target. Since October 7th, we have been highlighting the fact that many of the protests around the country, whether on campus or off, whether it was narratives that were circulating online, had featured not just opposition to Israeli policies, which is fine, but that they actually used opposition to Israel to try to isolate and dehumanize Israelis, Zionists, Jewish people, right? That the conversation was more militant, that people were more willing to tolerate the types of activities targeting the Jewish community that, would seem anathema to anybody else. And so the more that we had seen that, and the more that we documented this at event after event, it wasn't because we just wanted to educate the public, that's important, but it was really a warning of what might result from that. We have seen this play out time and time again in the Jewish community. The concern that many in the Jewish community have when they hear phrases like globalize the Intifada is that it reminds them of the intifadas that occurred, right? Which were violent. They featured, suicide bombings, a lot of death and destruction. And so when you call for the globalization of an intifada, many people hear that as calling for the globalization for violence against Jews. And so also when you yell free Palestine, and then target a Jewish community for violence. Again, these are pretty clear examples of anti-Semitism. I want to add one other thing is, the way that we have seen the sort of marginalization of the Jewish community post October 7th, these efforts to normalize that any Jewish person or anybody who supports Israel is a legitimate target. I mean, that happened immediately after the massacre on October 7th. And today, as we are looking at reactions to this attack in DC, we are seeing similar rhetoric. For example, one of the protest groups that we have tracked basically said that they're not condemning anything. A leader of Samidoun has said that genocide has consequences, right? What they are saying is that this violence is okay, that their opposition to Israel or others needs to be acted on against an entire community. So even the day after, it's not even a full day after this attack in DC, we are seeing the types of narratives that we believe likely were created an environment that enabled this attack to happen. Jewish institutions, according to our data last year, were targeted over 1,700 times. Clearly, Jewish institutions are vulnerable because when somebody wants to go attack Jews, they think, okay, I'll go to an institution. That's where I'm going to find Jewish people. I think what we need to remember is that when we have been calling out the most extreme rhetoric at protests and events around the country, we haven't focused on criticism of Israel. We have focused on the type of language and activity that we believe, that we have seen, leads to violence. And so I hope that when people try to contextualize what happened in DC, they will look back at what we have been trying to say, what we have been warning about. Because I think if you understand how words lead to action, more people hopefully will be part of that solution in pushing back against these narratives.